Welcome back, everybody. Derrick Soo, your East Oakland advocate. Well, there are those that constantly say that martial arts doesn't work in a street fight. Well, obviously, those folks have never truly been in a street fight and know anything about martial arts. And to a certain extent, I do kind of agree with that because I have seen black belts and high ranking uh, martial arts folks get their asses handed to them on the streets. And the reason is because they haven't truly trained for street combat. And that's where American martial arts differs from the martial arts that I grew up with. I grew up learning Wing Chun and in a full contact capacity and teaching, and so it enabled me to learn how to, number one, deal with pain, number two, uh, striking and blocking management, and three, conceive a line of attack, and number four, carrying out with everything you've got behind it. And when you train for real combat on the street, it's not like, yeah, you go in a competition and then a referee signals you, okay, let's start. No, a street on the street, the go signal is the moment somebody touches you, the moment you get a threat. That's your go signal, and people aren't taught that. You're taught to be nice and hospitable and friendly. Uh, yeah, I got all of that too. But then the difference between regular folks and myself is that I was constantly bullied. And I was bullied because of my race. I was Chinese. I grew up in a time when East Oakland was going through a lot of transition. There was, during the civil rights actions, uh, in my neighborhood, I saw literally what was called white flight. All the white people putting their homes up for sale and getting out of the area as fast as they could. And they were selling, they weren't, some people were making some money, but some people didn't care if they made money. They just wanted to get out. That's what white flight was about. They wanted to stick with only Caucasian white America. They didn't want blacks around them. They didn't want Latinos around them. And they barely tolerated Asians around them because the home that my parents bought in 1965, and we moved in on January 1st of 1966. The only reason why we were able to purchase that house is because the owner who had it for sale, it was on the market for 2 years and not one offer. And why was that? It wasn't because of a bad market, because homes are selling left and right. It was a period of a lot of growth here in Oakland. But it was racism. that because a white person would not buy a home that was lived in or previously or that was owned by an Asian, a Latino, or a black person. That's the way it was back then in the 60s. And bullying was common. I was when I started in grade school, that's when the bullying started. And it was the white flight kids. No, we don't like chinks. We don't talk to your kind here. And my only friend in my first experience in public school at age 5, this is kindergarten now, where racism happens. And my only friend was a little guy named Leo. And he was another little Asian kid, kind of strange looking. He was much smaller than me. And he didn't have any friends. So for the 5 months that I was there, Leo and I we were the only ones that got along. We had to get together because there were no other kids to go play with. And even in class, we didn't have many friends. And when I got to the new school, my first school was Markham Elementary School, just off of 73rd Avenue here in East Oakland. Then when my parents moved up the other end of 64th Avenue, I went to a school called Burbank Elementary School right at 64th Avenue and Majestic Avenue. And there was white flight going in there because I have pictures up until the second grade, class pictures. And my class was predominantly white. I was bullied in first grade, second grade. Third grade was my rebellion year, and where things really started changing because my grandfather started putting me into martial arts training. I had now become of age where my grandfather heard me complaining for a long time, and I was hard-headed like my half brother. That's why my grandfather raised us, because we were such a handful that number one, my mother had a very difficult time handling us because we were, number one, we were hard-headed and hard-ass. Hard-ass meaning that back in the day, parents used to hit their kids. Open-handed, wooden hangers, wire hangers, belts, all sorts of nasty stuff. That's why we have laws today against that. My mother was one of those who chose to use a wooden hanger on my hard ass. But she couldn't break me, just like my brother. Couldn't break him. How I mean breaking? No matter how much and how hard you hit us, you couldn't get us to cry. We wouldn't cry. We were tough kids. But anyway, I grew up in a very tough time. And American martial arts does not prepare you for combat. Whereas in my opening pictures, did you see those two pictures? Number one, my first picture, that was the most that this bully could get on me. He tore my shirt, and he didn't even hit my glasses. He didn't lay a hand on me. But if you look at his picture, it's a very different picture. Because the first thing I did within the first 3 seconds, I always tell people, within the first 3 seconds, I'm going to get you to bleed somewhere. And what I did to make him bleed, I hit him in the ear. Open hand, a cupped hand, and then just slammed it right into his ear, popping the eardrum. That happened in the first 3 seconds of our engagement. Because at the time, he was fully engaged in domestic violence, and I was trying to get him off of the victim. And in this case, it was his girlfriend. And he had been a real nasty person to begin with. He had a really bad attitude. He bullied everybody in the camp except me. And when it came down to me confronting him about his domestic violence issues and the person that he was being violent with, I moved her closer to where my shelter was, and that way, if I heard her being beat up or whatever, I would be able to intervene, and I ended up doing that within 2 weeks of moving her next door to me, and I warned him the night before because I heard some scuffling going on, but nothing serious. So I didn't intervene on that first one. But then when the girlfriend came and told me about it and what had happened, I said, okay, I'll have a talk with him, and I'm going to give him one last warning. And so that's what I did. And I told her, send him down here with that battery pack. Since he wants that battery pack charged, he's going to face me. So conversation, long story short, we got into it, and then he said, oh yeah, we'll see about that. You're just some Chinaman that don't belong here in East Oakland. So he started racist stuff before anything else, and that's what really lit my fuse. Racism really lights my fuse and I don't like it. I don't use racism on people unless they've earned it, and how they earn it is by them being very, very racist with me. And next morning, he started up, and within 3 seconds of the engagement, he didn't get off of her. I stepped in. I engaged. By the first thing I did, I just smacked that ear, popped that eardrum. Blood shot right out. I had blood on the palm of my hand, so I knew I had his equilibrium already uh, stoked. So he's already hit the ground just with that. And how the shirt got torn, that was him pulling himself up off the ground. And I'm just standing there. I'm telling him, it's like, dude, you better stay down, because it ain't going to be good if you stand up and face me face to face, because I'm going after you. And that's what ended up happening. And there was a lot more blood. And his girlfriend literally said that uh, she could not believe the intensity uh, that I brought. And her significant other one, the violent perp there, the bully, he had beaten up 6 Oakland police officers, 6 police officers he'd beaten up. He still had a bullet in him from another incident, and he had just gotten out of the leg cast from OPD breaking his leg, so that they could get him under arrest from a previous DV on the same victim. That's kind of person he was. And I encountered lots of people like that. And for those of you that say, well, martial arts doesn't work on the street, I tell you, you've never been in a real street fight, and you've never been trained for real fighting or real combat like me. Because number one, I was trained in Wing Chun for a number of years. I trained from 1968 to 1985 in Wing Chun. Then before 1985, I started training in Muay Thai, which is another close quarter, hand-to-hand combat type of um, discipline. And then once I got into my counterterrorism work, I also added in Eskrima, because I had a very long time Filipino friend whose family goes back to the islands in the Philippines, and they had their own version of Eskrima, and that's mixed Filipino martial arts added in with weapons. And so that's where Felix really came in handy, and I trained under his tutelage for 4 years while I lived in Harbor Bay Isle in Alameda. And he was one of the best. He even made me custom fighting sticks, which were incredible. And the wood was imported from the Philippines, and it was a very, very hard wood, the hardest wood I've ever dealt with, and it's solid uh, black. Because even when you sand it, you grind it, you cut it, it's black all the way through, and it hurts. Because that was, again, I trained for combat, and you train for combat by having full contact, just like boxing. Uh, and the thing about JKD, Jeet Kune Do, is that it's not a fighting style. It's a fighting philosophy. It's a combat philosophy that also applies to life, and how you can apply it to your work, how you can apply it to your life, how you can apply it to your lifestyle, your children, everything. So Jeet Kune Do is a very full package, and it's finding what works and helps you to express yourself. And Jeet Kune Do, for those of you that really don't know what that means, it means way of the intercepting fist. And so there are a lot of different techniques across many different martial arts. And I found, just like Bruce Lee did, Wing Chun did have limitations, because there were times when I had been in fights, street fights in school, and something didn't work, or I lost balance, but I didn't lose, but I didn't feel that I clearly had defeated my enemy. Uh, and there were times that went back all the way back to Frick Junior High. I remember one of my encounters with a bully. Back then, I was new to Frick Junior High, so I was a sophomore. That would have been 1972. It was lunchtime. I went to the juice machine, put my quarter in to get my juice. Some kid pushed me out of the way and said, "I'm just getting mine," and he got his juice in front of mine. He actually stole mine because he didn't even put a quarter in for his. I went out to confront him, and he threw the drink at me, and that's what started everything. And I just grabbed that hand along with that cup and just did a judo throw onto the ground, landing on top of him with my knee up across his neck. And I was getting ready to go to work on him. But then we had a yard mother who was close by, and uh, I'm getting ready to go to work, and I didn't, because she stopped me. And it was a good thing, because it wouldn't have been good for the bully. But that was one of the first encounters um, at school that I can remember. And there were many more at school. So I was constantly tested my martial arts. And the thing that annoyed me the most out of everything across my life, and even to this day, some jerk off saying, "Well, you think you're Bruce Lee or something?" Nope, I'm not Bruce Lee. Because if you understand JKD, everybody's version and style and philosophy will be different and unique, and it works for each individual. So, there are other examples of Jeet Kune Do, but they're called something else. But they work on the very similar philosophy and principles, taking the best of all across all the different fighting and combat styles and incorporating them into a combat system. And that's the system I'm talking about is Krav Maga, and that's the Israeli army fighting system, Krav Maga. And it's a very powerful system, and it's very flexible, much like Jeet Kune Do. It's a very flexible system, and you work with all of your strengths, and you work to the best of those strengths, and you work on your weaknesses. You find uh, solutions to solve your weaknesses, and if that means changing your fighting stance, there are a lot of different ways that you can help your fighting style, no matter what it is. When I grew up, uh, Kung Fu or Oakland Kung Fu was not taught to outsiders. And so you had to be 100% Chinese in order to learn Kung Fu. And I was one of those that was 100% Chinese. I have a cousin who is uh, half Chinese and half another Asian, which is Japanese, but they can't learn it because the Sifus are very strict on it. It doesn't matter what family they came from, you're not pure. Or they called the Sifus were pretty harsh at times. They would call them half breeds. They're half breeds, and especially because of what the Japanese did to the Chinese during World War II. So there was still a lot of hatred from that, and Oakland karate and judo dojos were everywhere. I mean, literally, they were down the street from my parents in East Oakland. Is across the street from the gas station that's still there. It was a Chevron station back then, and there was a karate and judo dojo right next to a little bakery that I loved called Toddy's back then. And um, I remember standing watching the lessons uh, back in the day. I was too young to start judo and karate. Was, I was only 6, and also I was a little bit too young to learn kung fu by the Oakland standards where we were being taught at that time. So anyway, a lot of people say, well, you've had a few fights on the street. No, I've had more than a few fights. Uh, I've dealt with a lot of bullies. I've dealt with a lot of thugs and criminals, and armed and unarmed. I've been attacked by as many as 5 at once. Actually, more than 5, the 6 at one time, plus a pit bull with them. And then another time, I actually knocked down the 5 that attacked me, tried to surprise me in the night. I was just simply taking my garbage out to the garbage pile, and 5 tried to jump me. Took out the first 3, the bigger ones, and broke one leg and a whole 2 sets of balls. And then the 2 behind them, they didn't want any part because the 3 that I took down in 4 seconds were much bigger than them. So yeah, I've been attacked with knives, machetes, uh, gang members coming into my shelter in the middle of the night. Didn't end up well for them, but for those of you, yes, I am out of all of the since 2014, March of 2014. I even had to battle some of my own early on. My first roomie, that Sleepy, he was martial arts also, and he was Taekwondo, black belt, fourth Dan, and I was constantly whooping his ass because he had only one fighting style, and if you know the nuances and the strong points of the fighting style like I did, you could easily defeat that person, and I did. And yeah, this is one of the things that he was always talking about. He wanted to learn this, he wanted to learn that, and all the different things. And I said, why? Why don't you add on another discipline to make up for those deficiencies? And he just didn't get it. He said, well, I'm kind of held to my Taekwondo. I really like things. Okay, well, because what I just used on you was 3 different disciplines, and I've been able to infuse them with each other so that I can move in and out of the Wing Chun, the Muay Thai, and the Eskrima flawlessly and fluidly. And one of the things that I can't say is that you've probably seen on a lot of the TV movies where, like Denzel Washington, he's using martial arts and British Jiu-Jitsu on a lot of people, and he turns on his little timer. Well, that's what we do also. Those of us who are really good in our martial arts, especially our JKD, Jeet Kune Do, because average street fights don't last long. In the movies, they go on forever and ever and ever, and where people are running around, it doesn't work like that shit. You get tired very quick, and the longest fight I've probably been in the street wasn't even a minute. You saw the results of 21 seconds at the beginning, and so I'd say it does work because I'm 47 and 0. I don't let people win. The one person that was in my camp, he tried to take over the camp early, or my site early, even long before the people knew we were there, and he was going to turn it into a criminal outlet. And Muhammad was a real bad person, and Sleepy apologized to me for allowing him to find out about us and bring him into the camp itself. But it was shortly after I had my surgery for my cancer. I was in recovery and very weak, and he saw that, and he came into my tent and said, and he announced that I'm taking over the camp. I'm going to run things from now on, and you just heal up, and then you can get the hell out of here when you're better. And I looked up at him. I said, that isn't going to happen, because even in my fragile state right here, I'm going to whoop your ass right now. He said, I'm special operations. I train. And I have the advantage that he didn't have on me. Said I saw him in a fight, and it was pathetic. Looked like two kindergarten kids on the schoolyard just bitch slapping each other. So anyway, I told him, yeah, I get to my feet, you better be out the door, because it's not going to be good for you. And he did last in the camp until that was about 2 more months before he was uncomfortable enough where he got up and left, and had to get up and leave, because my dog, Pandora, my American Staffordshire Terrier, did not like him. So both of us got the same vibe on him, and he didn't think my dog was anything until he provoked her, and she almost took his nose off. He just messed with her. I told him, don't do that. And all of a sudden, she just lunged at him and missed his nose by just barely. He felt her slobber. It was so close. And I mean, his eye, he backed up. His eyes, were huge as saucers. And I said, Pandora don't like you already. I don't recommend you fuck with her anymore, because next time I'm just going to let her go. I'm going to give her the release signal, and she can have at you. And she's a trained attack dog. So, yeah, they're living on the street is tough. And then being of a race that many people see as weak. And I don't claim to be a Bruce Lee fight alike. I fight like me. I fight for the street. I fought all my life in the street, perfecting my skill. And then when I perfected my skill, I perfected it even better with the philosophies and the trainings, the Chi trainings that I've received. And then what made me even more dangerous, then the United States government brought me in and made me even more dangerous, and a specialist in urban warfare. So these street criminals have no chance against me. And I've proved that time and time again. I was surrounded 3 different times by at least 17 criminals, and at nighttime, sometimes up to 30 criminals, all chanting outside that they're going to kill me. And yet I'm here today, and they're not. So, yes, mixed martial arts, Jeet Kune Do, JKD, does work, but you have to find what works for you. And then once you find what works for you, train to the best of your ability, learn everything that you possibly can on the philosophy and the theories of your fighting and combat style, because those all translate into your work, your life, your children. Thanks for joining me today. We'll be right back.